The hall of the colonial farmhouse sparkled with flowers and crystals to celebrate 50 years of marriage, until a slap turned the party into a nightmare. But what no one expected was that the 78-year-old patriarch, owner of the coffee empire, would do something unthinkable against his own son. A choice that would destroy the legacy of generations, but would save much more than a reputation. Stay until the end to discover how a man of almost 80 years old had the courage that many young people don't have. And tell me, would you have the courage to report your own son to seek justice? The century-old Mendonça farm was more than a symbol of power in the region. It was a living monument to the history of Brazilian coffee. The guests walked through avenues lined with centuries-old jabuticaba trees until they reached the colonial mansion, its white walls gleaming in the golden light of dusk. Inside, crystal chandeliers imported from Belgium illuminated a hall decorated with rare orchids and sepia photographs of 4 generations of coffee growers. Violins played old waltzes while crystal goblets clinked in meaningless toasts. The aroma of premium coffee, served in Chinese porcelain cups, mingled with the perfume of flowers and the unmistakable scent of power and tradition. Helena Mendonça, 28 years old, was like a delicate flower in a garden of thorns. Granddaughter of small farmers, she had met Eduardo during an agricultural fair, where she worked as a receptionist to pay for her agronomy degree. Now, 3 years later, she was the wife of the heir to the coffee empire, but her smile didn't reach her amber eyes. Throughout the party, she discreetly tugged at the long sleeve of her beige dress, trying to hide the purple marks on her wrist. "Is everything all right, dear?" asked the husband's aunt, noticing his paleness. "Yes, just tired. These events are intense," Helena replied, smiling with her lips, but her eyes silently pleading for help. Eduardo Mendonça, 45 years old, was the definition of privilege. A third-generation coffee farmer, he had never harvested a single bean with his own hands, but he knew the value of each sack on the international market. He was the heir to the empire, wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than his employees' annual salaries. His white gold watch gleamed ostentatiously as he raised his glass for yet another toast. "To the Mendonça family, and to the next 100 years of dominance in the coffee market," he proclaimed, his drawling voice betraying the glasses of 18-year-old whiskey he had been drinking since early in the day. Some guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Eduardo was known for his fits of rage when he drank, a man who confused power with the right to hurt. Little Luisa, Eduardo's 6-year-old niece, ran up to Helena with a colorful drawing in her hands. "Aunt Helena, I made this for you. It's you after you fell down the stairs. Look, I drew a giant band-aid on your eye." An awkward silence filled the room. Everyone knew that Helena had shown up with a black eye the previous week, claiming it was a domestic accident, a story few believed. The millionaire turned furiously to his wife, his bloodshot eyes blazing with hatred. "What stories have you been spreading, Helena?" he whispered through gritted teeth, smiling falsely at the nearby guests. "None, Eduardo. Children have imagination, you know," she replied, panic rising in her trembling voice. "Let's talk about this, now." Eduardo discreetly grabbed her arm, digging his fingers into her soft skin. In seconds, he dragged Helena to the terrace, away from prying eyes. The violins continued playing. The guests pretended not to notice, and the children were quickly taken to another room. The sound of the slap echoed through the hall like thunder on a clear night. But one person didn't stand still. Augusto Mendonça, the 78-year-old patriarch, left his glass untouched on the table, leaning on his hand-carved cane, a gift from the workers for his 70th birthday. He walked slowly to the terrace. Each step was as heavy as his conscience. Every meter traveled was a journey through decades, revisiting where he had gone wrong in raising that son. What Augusto would witness in the next few minutes would forever change not only the fate of the Mendonça family, but the history of an entire community built around coffee beans and complicit silences. The west terrace of the Mendonça mansion offered a privileged view of the coffee plantations that stretched to the horizon, undulating like a green sea under the silvery moonlight. It was Augusto's favorite place for contemplation, but that night it became the stage for a scene that would tear his heart apart. What Augusto Mendonça saw as he stepped through the heavy wooden door shattered his heart into 1,000 pieces, like a fine porcelain cup thrown to the floor. Her son, Eduardo, held his wife by the neck with one hand, while the other was raised, ready for another blow. Helena choked on silent tears, a trickle of blood running from her split lip, contrasting violently with the pallor of her skin. "You embarrass me in front of everyone with these lies," hissed Eduardo, so engrossed in his fury that he didn't notice his father's arrival. The patriarch felt the weight of his nearly 80 years like never before. Every line on his face seemed to deepen as he watched. For a second that felt like an eternity, the son he had raised. "Is this how you raise your wife, Edward? Is this the man I raised?" The patriarch's voice, normally calm as a breeze through the coffee plantations, cut through the air like a whip crack. Eduardo released his wife instantly, his face transforming from fury to a fake smile in seconds, a mask he had perfected over years of social manipulation. "Dad, it's not what it looks like. Helena is out of control. She's drunk too much," he tried to explain, nervously adjusting his silk tie. "And that would justify your hands on her neck?" retorted Augusto, advancing with firm steps despite his cane. "I'm old, son, but not blind." Augusto's gaze, those blue eyes that had witnessed the birth and growth of 3 generations of coffee plantations, met his trembling daughter-in-law, huddled against the terrace parapet. "Helena, darling, are you all right?" she asked with the gentleness that always characterized her relationships with the most vulnerable. Before he could answer, Eduardo stepped between them, blocking his father's view with his broad shoulders. "Of course he is. We're just talking privately. Go back to the party, Dad. The Andrades are asking about you. They wanted to discuss that export partnership." "To hell with the Andrades and any other business," Augusto replied, with a firmness that surprised even himself. "Get out of the way, Edward." The son hesitated, unaccustomed to orders. When he finally moved, Augusto saw something that would change everything. A drop of blood trickling down Helena's lip, contrasting dramatically with the white dress she was wearing, a gift from her father-in-law on her last birthday. "Eduardo, this party is over for you. Go to your room. Now." The order sounded like that of a father to a rebellious teenager, not to a middle-aged businessman. "Dad, I'm 45 years old. I'm not a child anymore," protested Eduardo, a vein throbbing in his temple. "And this is a private conversation between my wife and me. Marital matters that you wouldn't understand. Then stop acting like a monster. Either you leave, or I'll call the police right now." Eduardo laughed, a cold, calculated sound, like someone listening to a particularly silly joke. "Police? At the Mendonca's house? For God's sake, Dad, what would your friends say? The mayor is downstairs. Judge Almeida is drinking his favorite whiskey. What would happen to our shares if the press uncovered a family scandal?" Augusto raised his cane, not as a threat, but as one who points to the future, a future he was beginning to glimpse with painful clarity. "A man without character doesn't deserve to inherit even a grain of what I've built. Not a single grain, Eduardo. And this is not a threat. It's a promise." Turning to Helena, he extended his wrinkled hand, marked by decades of hard work that his son had never known. "Come, my daughter. You will sleep in the guest room tonight. Conceição will take care of you." Eduardo took a menacing step toward his father, but something in the old patriarch's gaze stopped him, a glimpse of the strength that had built an empire from almost nothing. "This isn't over, old man. You'll regret meddling in my affairs." That night, as the guests awkwardly withdrew, making excuses about morning commitments, a decision began to form in the old patriarch's mind. A decision that would cost him everything he had built in 78 years of life, but that perhaps, just perhaps, would save something far more valuable than money or status. The patriarch's room was surprisingly simple, considering his fortune. While Edward's quarters boasted state-of-the-art technology and furniture imported from Italy, Augustus preserved the essence of a more austere era. A bed made of rosewood crafted by his grandfather, the carpenter, dominated the center of the room. On the walls, black and white photographs told the story not only of a family, but of a land, the first harvest in 1902, his father as a young man beside the first Arabica coffee seedlings, himself as a teenager, learning to recognize the ideal ripeness of the beans. In a discreet corner, a small built-in safe known to few held not jewels or money, but documents that traced the true journey of the Mendonça family, including mistakes the public never knew about. Augusto couldn't sleep. Sitting in the worn leather armchair by the window, he watched the coffee plantation silvered by the moonlight. His eyes, tired from decades of meticulous work, were fixed on the carved wooden ceiling, while his mind relived each crucial moment in Eduardo's upbringing. The incessant business trips when the boy needed his father's presence, expensive gifts to make up for lost time, excessive permissiveness fueled by guilt. The early warning signs were ignored when teenager Eduardo humiliated employees. The repeated excuse, "It's just a phase. It will pass when you take responsibility." "My God, what have I created?" he whispered to the silence of the room, where portraits of 3 generations seemed to watch him with accusing glances. The patriarch rose with difficulty and walked to the window. Outside, beyond the coffee plantations, the lights of the workers' houses dotted the darkness like fallen stars. Entire families whose lives depended on the decisions made in the big house. How many Helenas existed in those simple houses, suffering in silence? At 4 a.m., soft knocks on the door interrupted his gloomy thoughts. It was Dona Concepcion, the housekeeper who had served the family for 42 years, long enough to be considered almost part of the Mendonça clan, although everyone knew she would never be treated as an equal. "Mr. Augusto?" The gray-haired woman's voice was tense. "Are you awake? Come in, Concepcion. Sleep has long since abandoned me." The housekeeper entered, her uniform impeccable even at that hour, as if she were always on duty. "Little Helena has a fever. She's crying a lot and doesn't want a doctor. She says she's fine, but she's shaking like a leaf." The patriarch picked up his silk robe from the chair. "Where is she?" "In the dollhouse. I thought it best to take her there, away from—" Concepcion hesitated. "Far from my son," Augusto finished, his voice devoid of emotion. "You did well, Concepcion. I'll go there." The path to the old dollhouse required crossing the garden. Built when Eduardo's great-grandmother was a child, the perfect miniature of the main house had been renovated over the years and now served as a chalet for special guests. The patriarch found his daughter-in-law sitting on the edge of the bed, her face still marked, her gaze lost in the darkness beyond the window. Helena was trembling, but Augusto realized it wasn't from fever. It was from terror. "It was just an accident, Mr. Augusto," she murmured when she saw him come in. "I really did fall. I'm clumsy. I always have been." "Helena, please." Her hands frantically twisted the fabric of Concepcion's borrowed sweater. "He'll kill me if I say anything. It was just an accident, a silly fight." Augusto sat on the edge of the bed. His wrinkled hands, calloused from decades of harvesting the finest grains, held hers with the delicacy of someone examining a rare flower. "How many times have you fallen, Helena?" Silence was the most painful answer he could receive. In the shadows of her eyes, he saw the reflection of all the women who had passed through Eduardo's life. Some he had known, others he suspected existed, all marked in some way. "If not for yourself, then for your baby." Helena's eyes widened, and she instinctively brought her hand to her still flat stomach. "How do you—" Augusto smiled, a sad smile that briefly illuminated the deep wrinkles around his eyes. "I am 78 years old. I have seen 3 generations born. I recognize a pregnant woman by the sparkle in her eyes, even when they are full of tears." Helena broke down in sobs, hugging her father-in-law as if he were a lifeline in a stormy sea. Augusto felt her tears wetting his shoulder, while his own vision blurred with the dampness he was trying to contain. "He can't know," she whispered between sobs. Last time he pushed me on purpose. I lost a 2-month-old baby. He said it was too early for children." At that moment, the patriarch made his final decision. She kissed her daughter-in-law's forehead with paternal affection and walked to her room, each step more determined than the last, despite the constant pain in her knees. He opened the safe and took out 3 items that symbolized his past, present, and a possible future. The leather-bound journal where he recorded everything for 60 years, from the weather for the harvests to the family's darkest secrets. A silver pen drive where he stored the recordings from the security cameras, installed after a robbery, but which ended up capturing much more. An old Colt pistol that had belonged to his father, used only once to scare off invaders during the 1929 crisis. He removed the bullets from the pistol, storing them separately in a locked drawer. "We won't need this," he murmured to himself, feeling the cold weight of the metal in his wrinkled hands. "The truth will be our only weapon, and perhaps the most devastating." The Vila do Café police station occupied a modest building in the central square, just 2 blocks from the statue of the city's founder, coincidentally, Augusto Mendonça's great-grandfather. The contrast between the simplicity of the public institution and the grandeur of the Mendonça farm was a true reflection of the region's disparities. Detective Firmino Alves was on his second cup of coffee when the receptionist announced, in a trembling voice, "Mr. Firmino, Mr. Augusto Mendonça is here and wants to speak with you." The police chief nearly choked. In his 15 years as a local authority, he had never received a visit from the patriarch of the most powerful family in the region. Normally, he was called to the farm when necessary, or he dealt with the family's lawyers. "Mr. Augusto, what a surprise!" he exclaimed, rising quickly and adjusting his worn tie. "Please come in. Would you like some coffee? It's not from the Mendonça family, of course, but it's reasonable." The patriarch entered slowly, leaning on his cane. He wore a simple but impeccably tailored gray suit, a stark contrast to his visibly tired face, marked by a sleepless night. "Any problems on the farm? Coffee theft? Have those invaders returned to cause trouble on the western border?" Augusto sat down with difficulty in the simple metal chair, so different from the ergonomic armchairs in his office. "I came to report a crime, Firmino." "Crime?" The detective frowned, confused. The Mendonça family usually resolved their problems internally. "What kind of crime?" "Domestic violence." The officer shifted, visibly uncomfortable. His gaze drifted to the clerk, who immediately understood the message and began typing something on the old computer. "Is some employee mistreating his wife? You know how it is, right? Sometimes simple people resolve things by, 'That's my son, Eduardo. He's assaulting his wife, Helena.'" The delegate's coffee spilled across the table, staining some documents. The clerk stopped typing, his fingers suspended over the keyboard as if frozen. In the small anteroom, the receptionist, who had obviously been listening to everything, let out a muffled exclamation. Firmino cleared his throat, searching for words. He had grown up respecting, or fearing, the Mendonça family. His own father had been foreman on the farm for 30 years. "Mr. Augusto, with all due respect, are you sure? Mr. Eduardo is a respected man, president of the Coffee Growers Association, godfather of the São João Festival." The patriarch placed the silver flash drive on the table next to the puddle of coffee. "Here are videos from the farm's security cameras. 3 assaults in less than a month. The most recent was last night, during our golden wedding anniversary celebration. There's also my testimony as an eyewitness, and Dona Conceição, our housekeeper, will probably testify as well if necessary." The detective grabbed the flash drive like a grenade about to explode. His eyes couldn't meet those of old Mendonça. "Mr. Augusto, do you have any idea what you're doing? He's your only son, your heir. If this gets out to the press is the least of my problems, Firmino. And it's precisely because he's my son and heir that he needs to learn that no man is above the law, not even a Mendonça." The officer ran his hand through his thinning hair in a nervous gesture. "The mayor is going to kill me. Judge Almeida is Eduardo's close friend. The mayor and the judge are not above the law either. And if they try to interfere, I have other contacts in the capital. This complaint will be filed, Firmino, today, with or without your help." There was a determination in Augusto's voice that the delegate had never heard before. This was not the conciliatory tone of the businessman negotiating advantageous deals, nor the authoritarian voice of the boss whom everyone feared to displease. It was something deeper, the voice of a man who had finally found his moral purpose. While the police officer with trembling hands wrote the police report, Augusto gazed out the window of the police station. He could see in the distance the verdant hills where his coffee plantations flourished. This year's harvest would be exceptional, according to the agronomists. Ironically, while his personal life was crumbling, his business was thriving. "Your son will be arrested today, Mr. Augusto," the officer finally said, after completing the document. "We'll issue the warrant as soon as the judge on duty authorizes it. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" The patriarch adjusted his Panama hat over his white hair, rising with the dignity of someone who had made an irreversible decision. "One bad grain can contaminate the entire harvest, Firmino. Sometimes you have to separate what's no good, even if it's from your own blood, even if the price is too high." As he left the police station, Augusto noticed a group of men watching him from across the square, farm workers who had come to town that morning. The respect in their eyes was something new, different from the usual mixture of fear and subservience. "Good morning, boss," said one of them, taking off his hat. "Good morning, Sebastião. How is your wife?" The man seemed surprised that his boss remembered his name. and even more so that he asked about his family. "That's better, Mr. Augusto. That medicine you sent helped a lot." Augusto smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "Great. Tell her that Donna Concepcion will send more herbs this week." As he got into his simple car, not the company Jaguar, but a Ford he had bought with his first real money, Augusto had the feeling that, at 78, he was finally beginning to get to know his own employees, and perhaps, just perhaps, beginning to know himself. Patriarch accuses millionaire son of domestic violence. Coffee empire in crisis. Heir arrested after father's complaint. Scandal in the rural aristocracy. Augusto Mendonça hands over his own son to the police. The sensationalist headlines were splashed across not only local newspapers, but had even reached national media outlets. In less than 24 hours, the story of the Mendonça family had spread throughout the country like wildfire in a parched coffee plantation. On the São Paulo Stock Exchange, shares of Industrias Mendonça plummeted 18% even before lunchtime. Desperate brokers tried to contact the Investor Relations Department, only to find answering machines and automated messages. In the small town of Vila do Café, where 70% of the population depended directly or indirectly on family businesses, news was the only topic of conversation on every corner, in every establishment. "They say the old man has gone completely mad," commented the barber while trimming a customer's beard. "I heard that his son threatened to disinherit him, so he took revenge," speculated the pharmacy clerk. "The girl is pregnant, did you know? My cousin works at the house and said she's expecting. Could that be why her husband beat her?" whispered a woman in the bank line. The farm, once the pride of the region with its guided tours of award-winning crops, was now surrounded by reporters from all over. Photographers with telephoto lenses hung from the centuries-old fences, trying to capture images of the House of Shame, as a sensationalist national TV program had dubbed it. Television station cars were parked on the back roads. Drones flew over the property, ignoring the private property signs. A helicopter from a São Paulo television station made low passes, startling the cattle and disturbing the bucolic peace that had always characterized the place. Inside the mansion, the phone never stopped ringing. Dona Concepcion, the housekeeper, had unwittingly become the family's spokesperson. "No, Mr. Augusto will not give interviews," she repeated tirelessly every 5 minutes. "No, Mrs. Helena is not available. No, we don't know when Mr. Eduardo will be released. No, we have no comment on the impact on coffee exports." In the main rooms, Augusto watched the chaos through the window. He had never liked public attention. It was Eduardo who had always sought the spotlight, with his extravagant parties and appearances in the specialized media. "Mr. Augusto?" Concepcion knocked softly on the door. "Father Antonio is here. He wants to speak with you." The patriarch sighed. He had expected this visit. The local church had always maintained close relations with the family, benefiting from generous donations in exchange for moral influence. Father Antonio, a chubby middle-aged man, entered the office with a serious expression. He carried a rosary wrapped around his plump fingers and a small Bible in his cassock pocket. "Augusto, my son, I came as soon as I heard. The community is in shock." "I imagine so, Father. Please sit down." The priest settled into the leather armchair, politely declining the coffee offered by Concepcion. "I was contacted by the mayor's wife this morning. Everyone is very worried, Augusto. This scandal is," he searched for the right words, "it's destroying our city's reputation. International buyers are canceling orders, fearing instability. Next month's coffee festival could be ruined." Augusto watched the priest for a few seconds, noticing how the man avoided mentioning Helena or the assaults. It was all about business, image, money. "And what about my daughter-in-law's reputation, Father? What is the value of the dignity of a battered woman? Is there a market value for that too?" The priest shifted uncomfortably. "Family problems should be resolved within the family, Augusto, in the privacy of the home, with prayer and—" "It was precisely this mentality that allowed this to happen for so long," interrupted the patriarch, his voice calm but firm. "How many other women suffer in silence in our community, Father? How many have their bruises hidden by long sleeves at Sunday Mass?" The priest, who had known the Mendonça family for 3 generations, having baptized Eduardo and officiated his wedding to Helena, responded with what he believed to be wisdom. "Perhaps our city really needs to rethink what kind of reputation we want to have. One that hides crimes for money, or one that defends justice at any cost?" You took a courageous step, Augusto, but you will need strength for what lies ahead. On his way out, the priest encountered Miguel, Augusto's youngest son, arriving in a hurry. The two men exchanged only a distant wave. Meanwhile, miles away, in the special cell of the municipal jail, a concession granted by the police chief to the inmate's social standing, Eduardo was receiving a visit from his lawyer, Dr. Ricardo Mendez, a specialist in white-collar crimes, known for defending corrupt politicians and businessmen accused of fraud. I managed to get habeas corpus for tomorrow morning, the lawyer announced, displaying a satisfied smile. Judge Almeida is on duty, thankfully. Your father is clearly senile. We'll use that. The question is, what will we do after that? Eduardo, seated in the only chair in the special cell, his eyes as cold as steel, replied, "And then? I'll show everyone what happens when someone tries to destroy a Mendonça, starting with my own father." The lawyer took a small digital recorder out of his pocket and placed it on the table. "We have a lot to plan then. The first board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. All the board members have already been properly informed." Eduardo smiled for the first time since his imprisonment, a smile that didn't reach his eyes and would make anyone who truly knew him tremble with fear. "Great. My dad wants to play hardball. He has no idea what's coming." The headquarters of Industrias Mendonça occupied the top 2 floors of a mirrored building in the financial center of the regional capital. Despite retaining the family name, the company had expanded far beyond the original plantations, now controlling the entire coffee production chain, from cultivation to export to 32 countries, in addition to a network of premium coffee shops expanding throughout the country. The Administrative Council was summoned to an emergency meeting at 2 p.m., as planned. Eduardo, recently released from prison with habeas corpus granted by the amicable Judge Almeida, arrived punctually, escorted by 2 enormous bodyguards, a novelty that did not go unnoticed. He looked impeccable in his navy blue Italian suit, with no visible sign of the previous night in the special cell. The only indication of stress was a slight tremor in his right hand, which he disguised by keeping it in his pocket or firmly gripping a Mont Blanc pen. "Gentlemen, good afternoon," he announced, sitting down at the head of the solid mahogany table, occupying the chair that had traditionally belonged to his father. "This meeting has a single objective: to vote on the removal of Augusto Mendonça from the presidency of the council due to mental incapacity." The advisors, 10 men and 2 women, all dressed in dark colors as if attending a funeral, avoided eye contact with one another. Most owed their positions to Edward, or had side dealings with him. Some simply feared his power to retaliate. But Augusto founded this company, ventured Harbas Medeiros, one of the oldest employees, who had worked with the patriarch for almost 4 decades. Perhaps we should listen to him before making any hasty decisions. Eduardo slammed his fist on the table hard enough to make the cups of fine coffee tremble. "Rash about it? My father is senile. He's destroying a century-old legacy because of his delusions. Did you see what happened to our stock yesterday? A 14% drop in a single day. Do you know what that means? How many jobs will be lost if we continue like this?" The mention of jobs was strategic, a veiled threat to everyone present and their protégés. "The police raided my house with a warrant based on absurd accusations. My wife is pregnant, emotionally unstable, and says nonsensical things. And my father, instead of protecting the family, is exposing everything to the media." One of the advisors, Dr. Regina Vasconcelos, a respected neurologist and friend of the family, timidly raised her hand. "Eduardo, perhaps your father really needs medical help. Advanced age, stress, maybe the beginning of dementia. We could suggest a complete evaluation before taking such drastic measures." "I've already taken care of that," Eduardo replied quickly, gesturing to his assistant, who distributed folders to those present. Dr. Sergio Bueno, a geriatric specialist, conducted a preliminary assessment based on recent behaviors and previous medical records. What no one mentioned is that Dr. Bueno had never personally examined Augusto, and that the medical records had been generously edited. "The vote will be by name," Eduardo announced after 20 minutes of controlled discussion. "Those who vote for the immediate removal of Augusto Mendonça from the presidency of the council due to mental incapacity, raise your hand and state your name for the record." The vote was quick and almost unanimous. Only Harbas Medeiros abstained, an act of courage that would cost him his job before the end of the day. The patriarch was officially removed from the company he had created from scratch. That same afternoon, Eduardo ordered drastic changes that reverberated throughout the organization. Immediate dismissal of employees loyal to the father, including the former chief accountant and Augusto's personal secretary. Transfer of all bank accounts to his exclusive control, freezing the patriarch's access to funds. Augusto was barred from accessing the company's properties, except for the main house, which technically still belonged to a family trust. Hiring a medical team to assess the sanity of the father, in reality, a first step towards declaring the patriarch legally incompetent. A press release was issued citing age-related mental health issues of the founder. When Augusto received the official notification, he was on the veranda of the main house, watching the workers returning from the coffee plantations in the golden twilight. It was a scene that had always brought him peace, the steady rhythm of rural life, the dignity of a job well done. "Sir, Dr. Eduardo's lawyer left this document," said the butler, visibly embarrassed, handing over an envelope bearing the Mendonça Industries logo. The old man calmly read the 5-page document that essentially stripped him of everything he had built up throughout his life. Each paragraph was a stab in the back, each legal clause a betrayal. He folded it carefully and put it in the pocket of his white linen shirt. "Bring me paper and a pen, please, and an envelope." The butler quickly returned with the requested items, curious about his employer's surprisingly calm reaction. In his old, elegant handwriting, learned from German nuns in a time when the aesthetics of writing still mattered, Augusto wrote a single paragraph. He signed it, folded it, and handed it to the butler. "Give this to my son when he arrives. Hand it to him personally, Arnaldo. Don't leave it with anyone else." The butler nodded, putting the envelope in his waistcoat pocket. "Sir, will you be all right?" Augusto smiled, a tired but serene smile. "I'm going, Arnaldo. I lost a lot today, but I gained something I haven't had in a long time: peace of mind." That night, when Eduardo returned triumphantly to the mansion, he received the note from his father in the trembling hands of the old butler. "Eduardo, you can take away my company, my land, and even my family name, but there's one thing you'll never have: peace of mind at night knowing the kind of man you've become." His father, who still awaits his redemption, Augusto Eduardo, crumpled the note and threw it into the blazing fireplace, watching the paper be consumed by the flames. However, the words had already been etched into his mind, and they would return to haunt him in the darkest hours of the night. The old dollhouse was located at the far east end of the property, surrounded by centuries-old jaboticaba trees whose gnarled trunks and dense canopies formed a natural barrier, partially hiding it from the view of the main house. Built in 1912 for Eduardo's great-grandmother when he was a child, Dona Berenice Mendonça, the house was an architecturally perfect miniature of the big house. With 2 bedrooms, a living room, a fully equipped kitchen, and even a small veranda with colonial-style columns, the place exuded a unique charm, part dollhouse, part secret retreat. Originally painted in pastel shades, the house had been restored 5 years earlier, when Augusto decided to transform it into a chalet for special guests. The walls now displayed a classic white, with colonial blue accents on the windows and doors. The interior combined restored antique furniture with some contemporary pieces, creating a welcoming and timeless atmosphere. It was there that Helena found refuge in the days following the scandal. The press had not yet discovered this corner of the property, and the security guards hired by Eduardo did not have access to this part of the land, a precaution taken by Miguel as soon as he arrived. "These teas will help with pregnancy nausea," said Dona Concepcion, placing a silver tray on the side table next to the armchair where Helena spent hours looking out the window, contemplating the small herb garden. "Mr. Augusto asked me to bring his books as well." The housekeeper pointed to the stack of classic novels and some modern books on sustainable agriculture. Helena had a degree in agronomy, something Eduardo had always looked down on, calling his education an expensive hobby paid for by Daddy. Helena looked at the books and smiled for the first time in days. A shy smile, as if she were relearning the gesture. "Thank you, Concepcion. How is he?" The housekeeper sighed, smoothing her immaculately white apron in an automatic gesture. "Sturdy as always. Doesn't seem like he lost everything. Spends his days writing in his diary, talking to the few employees who haven't been fired yet. And how are they reacting in the city? Divided. Some say Augusto is crazy, others, well, other women have started talking. The bank manager's wife, The pharmacist's daughter? It seems Eduardo left a trail of tears wherever he went. Helena absent-mindedly stroked her 4-month pregnant belly, now visible beneath her light cotton dress. Is Eduardo really going to take everything from him, Conceição? The housekeeper served chamomile and lemon balm tea in fine porcelain cups, a small luxury she insisted on maintaining, as a form of dignity amidst the chaos. He already took it away, my daughter. The lawyers came yesterday with papers, documents, veiled threats. Mr. Augusto can only stay in the big house because it's in his grandmother's name, Mrs. Berenice. May God rest her soul. An old clause that even Eduardo couldn't break. Yet. How long do you think it will take before he comes after me? Tries to have me committed or worse? The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. They both knew it wasn't an if, but a when. Miguel is taking care of it. He hired private security, outsiders who don't owe the Mendonça family any favors. And Detective Firmino, despite everything, is a man of his word. He has officers on standby. Helena took a sip of the tea, letting the comforting warmth spread through her body. Why did he do that, Conceição? Augusto, denouncing his own son, sacrificing everything. Nobody does that. Nobody with so much to lose. The housekeeper sat down beside her, her wrinkled hands absent-mindedly arranging the cups, a habit honed over decades of impeccable service. Because there are men for whom honor is worth more than money or blood. And because Augusto carries an enormous guilt for having raised Eduardo the way he did, permissive, spoiled, believing that the world owed him everything. He told me once, years ago, after an incident with an employee, Conceição, my greatest failure wasn't a business deal that went wrong. It was not teaching my son to be a real man. That afternoon, as the sun began to set behind the coffee-covered mountains, Helena made a decision that would change the course of events. She asked Conceição for paper and pen, not a laptop or tablet that could be tracked, and began to write her own testimony. Page after page, in small, neat handwriting, she detailed every act of aggression, every threat, every humiliation of the last 3 years of marriage. The dates, the triggers, the consequences. The baby lost the previous year after a deliberate push. The friends who distanced themselves, the doctors paid to falsify medical records, the household staff instructed not to see, not to hear. If Augusto had the courage to lose everything to defend me, she thought, as she closed her makeshift diary, I too need to have the courage to tell my story, not just for myself or for this baby, but for all the others who couldn't speak. When she finished writing, it was already night. Helena put the diary under the mattress and walked to the small balcony. Above, the sky displayed a blanket of bright stars, so different from the blinding lights of the big city where she had grown up. Your baby will be born into a better world, she whispered to the child in her womb, a promise made not only with words, but with the growing determination in her heart. I promise. But Chapter 8, The Return of the Youngest Son. The private jet cut through the blue May sky, leaving a white trail like a scar in the heights. Inside the luxurious cabin, Miguel Mendonça, 32, observed the Brazilian landscape through the window, a view he hadn't seen in 7 years. The farms, laid out in geometric patterns, rivers winding between verdant hills, small towns with their white churches at the center, a sight that simultaneously warmed and tightened his heart. It was his country, his land, but also the place of his most painful memories. We'll be landing in 15 minutes, sir, the pilot informed him over the intercom. The weather is perfect for landing. Miguel adjusted his seatbelt and closed the laptop where he had been reviewing documents throughout the flight from Amsterdam. A graduate in sustainable agronomy from the prestigious Wageningen University in the Netherlands, he specialized in organic coffee cultivation methods, working as a consultant for cooperatives in Africa and Southeast Asia. His departure from Brazil 7 years earlier had not been planned. It had happened after a violent fight with Eduardo, not just verbal but physical, about farming methods. Miguel had advocated for the transition to organic farming. Eduardo, obsessed with productivity and short-term profits, had called his brother's ideas hippie fantasy. The argument culminated in aggression when Miguel discovered that Eduardo had secretly ordered the spraying of banned pesticides in an experimental area where his younger brother was developing a project without chemical pesticides. "You are poisoning our own legacy," Miguel shouted before Eduardo delivered the first blow. The small municipal airport, with its single runway and modest terminal, hadn't changed much. Miguel recognized, waiting on the tarmac, The familiar figure of Joaquim, the family's former driver, a tall black man, now with completely gray hair, who had served the Mendonça family for almost 4 decades. "Dr. Michael, it's been so long," exclaimed Joaquim, a genuine smile spreading across his face as he approached to help with the luggage. "Your father doesn't know you're coming. I thought it was better this way, Joaquim. I didn't want to create expectations in case there were any problems with the flight." On the way to the farm, driving the family's old Volvo along rural roads that Miguel knew like the back of his hand, Joaquim updated young Mendonça on the events, a raw and direct summary, without the sensationalism of the press or the edited version circulating in the city. "Your brother took everything, doctor. The stocks, control of the companies, even your father's bank accounts. Your Augusto only has the clothes on his back and the few friends who haven't turned their backs on him yet. The people in town are divided. Those who owe Eduardo favors pretend his father has gone mad. The others, well, the others are afraid." "And Helena, how is she?" "Pregnant. About 4 months, according to what Conceição told me. She's hiding in the dollhouse. Her brother is trying to have her forcibly admitted, saying she has post-traumatic depression and doesn't know what she's saying. He's already tried twice to request a compulsory psychiatric evaluation." Miguel watched the familiar landscape unfolding outside the window. The coffee plantations he had known since childhood, now more extensive, more industrialized. Where riparian forest once protected the rivers, the plantation now stretched almost to the bank. Where workers once harvested manually, selecting only the ripe beans, now large machines swept everything away indiscriminately. "Is my father very upset?" Joaquim considered the question for a moment, slowing down as he passed a potholed section of the road. "Mr. Augusto is like those centuries-old ipe trees, Dr. Miguel. He may lose all his leaves in the drought, but his trunk doesn't bend. I've never seen him cry or lament. He just sits there on the porch, writing in that old diary, talking to whoever still has the courage to speak to him. But you can see it in his eyes, a deep sadness." As the car approached the farm, Miguel asked to enter through the back, via a side road that few knew. He didn't want to be seen by the thugs Eduardo had hired for security, hard-faced men who now patrolled the main gates with walkie-talkies and, it was suspected, unregistered weapons. The reunion between father and son was silent, without grand words or dramatic gestures. A long embrace in the study of the big house, while the midday light filtered through the old windows, creating geometric patterns on the dark wooden floor. Augusto seemed to have aged 10 years and 7. His hair, once gray, was now completely white. New wrinkles marked his sunburnt face, but his eyes, those blue eyes that Miguel had inherited, retained the same strength, the same determination that had always characterized the patriarch. "Dad, why didn't you call me? I would have come sooner." Augusto smiled, his eyes welling up with tears. "And take you away from your life in Europe. You were finally happy, son. Building something of your own, away from the shadow of this family." Miguel looked around at the once imposing office, now with empty spaces on the walls where valuable paintings had once hung. The export trophies, the photographs with presidents and ministers, the old map of the original property. Everything had vanished. He really took everything. Things, Miguel, just things. What matters can't be moved in moving trucks. The young man sat down in the worn leather armchair, the same one where, as a child, he had sat so many times listening to his grandfather's stories. "I read about what happened, Dad, in the online newspapers, but I want to hear it from you, the whole truth." Over the next 2 hours, Augusto recounted the events, from the first suspicions about Eduardo's behavior with Helena, to the decision to report him, and all the consequences that followed. He spoke without anger, without self-pity, like someone reporting clinical facts. "I'll stay, Dad, for as long as it takes. You have your life, Miguel. Projects in Africa, your work in the Netherlands. None of that matters now. Family comes first. You always taught me that." That afternoon, after a simple meal prepared by Conceição, Miguel visited Helena at the dollhouse. His sister-in-law, whom he barely knew personally, they had only met at the wedding and on 2 brief subsequent visits, received him with initial distrust. Helena was thinner than in the photos Miguel had seen, despite her pregnant belly. Her eyes, once lively according to what her father had said, now had deep dark circles and a cautious glint. Her long brown hair was tied up in a simple bun, and she wore loose clothes that concealed her figure. "Did you come to help your brother get me admitted?" she asked directly, without any preliminary greetings, her hand unconsciously protectively resting on her stomach. Miguel shook his head, keeping a respectful distance. "I came to help bring justice, and I need you to tell me everything, Helena, from the beginning, not just what happened to you, but what you know about other incidents." Helena hesitated, studying her brother-in-law's face, so similar to her husband's in structure, but completely different in expression. Where Eduardo had harshness, Miguel had compassion. Where one had calculating coldness, the other had human warmth. "Why should I trust you? You Mendonças are all the same. Empire, legacy, appearances." "No, we're not," Miguel replied calmly. "And the proof is that I'm here, and not by my brother's side as would be convenient for my bank account." As the sun set, casting long shadows on the small garden of the dollhouse, an unlikely alliance began to form on the Mendonça farm. An alliance that Eduardo hadn't expected, and one that would transform his seemingly perfect plan into a house of cards about to collapse. Dona Conceição Oliveira knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. In her 42 years as housekeeper for the Mendonça family, her eyes witnessed 3 generations of secrets. Her hands cleaned stains that no one should see, and her ears listened to conversations that could ruin reputations. Born on the farm itself, the daughter of a coffee worker and a cook, Conceição began as a helper at age 14. Her discretion, efficiency, and loyalty quickly propelled her to the position of head housekeeper before she turned 30. Now, at 56, she was practically an institution, as much a part of the house as the colonial beams or the peroba wood flooring. That night, after Miguel arrived, Conceição served him a simple dinner in the back kitchen, the heart of the house, where the servants truly knew everything that went on in the house. It was a cozy setting, with a huge wooden table in the center, copper pots hanging on the walls, and the constant smell of freshly brewed coffee and homemade bread. "I never thought I'd be happy eating rice and beans again," commented Miguel, savoring each bite of the comforting food that reminded him of his childhood. "The doctor lost weight in Europe," observed Conceição, adding another ladleful of beans to her plate. "Don't they have real food there?" Miguel smiled, accepting the reinforcement. "Yes, but you're not doing it, Conceição." After the meal, while Miguel drank a strong coffee, the house special, as Conceição called the small reserve she kept hidden for important occasions, the housekeeper began to talk about what really mattered. Seated in the worn wooden chair, her hands constantly in motion, sometimes smoothing her apron, sometimes adjusting her graying bun, she unraveled memories like someone unraveling an endless ball of yarn. It was when the boy Eduardo was about 14 years old that I noticed the first strange things. He would take the kittens from the farm, you know. He did mean things. I found 2 drowned in the small well. Juca, who was the foreman at the time, found another one hanging from a tree. Miguel listened attentively, taking notes in a small notebook, his face a mask of professional neutrality that concealed his inner horror. His father never knew about it. My late brother Juca and I decided to keep it a secret. Mr. Augusto was so proud of his eldest son, so busy expanding the business after his mother's death, we thought it was just a phase. And then what? Conceição got up to put more water on to boil, an automatic gesture to buy time, to reorganize painful thoughts. Then came the girls. It started with José do Armazém's daughter. She was about 16 years old. She showed up here crying one day, her dress torn. Then came Dona Teresa's niece from the sewing shop, and a few more. Always girls from simple families who wouldn't have been able to stand up to a Mendonça. "Rape?" Miguel asked directly, his voice controlled. "I can't say for sure. They were always confusing stories. The girls scared, crying. Always resolved with money. Always hushed up. Old Juca would go with an envelope, talk to the parents, and the story would die there." The housekeeper wiped away a furtive tear with the sleeve of her always impeccable uniform. "I feel guilty every day, Dr. Miguel. If we had told his father, maybe young Eduardo would have received help, you know? Maybe he wouldn't have become this monster," Miguel finished, closing the notebook. "You're not to blame, Conceição. You were young, following orders, doing what you believed was best for the family. There's more," she continued, pouring more coffee into the simple ceramic cups. 3 years ago, when Eduardo took over the financial side of the company, the counterfeiting began. Miguel leaned forward, his professional interest heightened. "Forgeries? Your father's signatures on documents. I saw them because I clean the office every day before anyone else comes in. Your Eduardo would stay up late practicing, copying his father's handwriting. Then he would use it on papers, contracts, things that your Augusto would never sign. What type of documents? Authorization to use certain products on the plantations, things his father had forbidden. Sale of a protected area to a friend to build a resort. And there was something about child labor on farms in the north. His father would never allow that. Miguel quickly jotted it down, his mind calculating the legal and financial implications of such fraud. Are you absolutely sure about this, Conceição? Could we prove it in court? That same night, after making sure everyone had gone to bed, Conceição took Miguel to his modest room at the back of the main house. From a hiding place under the floorboards, behind a small altar with images of saints, he took out a worn-out shoebox. I kept these things for years, Dr. Miguel. I thought they might be needed someday. Mr. Augusto always said that documents are like seeds. You don't know when they'll germinate, but it's good to have them saved. The box contained a veritable treasure trove of evidence. Newspaper clippings about mysterious accidents involving employees who had threatened to report irregularities, detailed notes on dates and amounts embezzled from company accounts, carbon copies of documents with visibly forged signatures, and even a handwritten letter from Eduardo's ex-girlfriend describing physical and psychological abuse. The girl was later found dead. They say it was suicide, that she jumped off the big bridge, but her brother, who worked on the farm, always said she had no reason to do it. She had just passed her university entrance exam. She was happy. Miguel held the box like dynamite, which, in terms of explosive potential for the family's reputation, was quite a feat. Why are you giving this to me now, Conceição? Why not before? The housekeeper adjusted her graying bun, her wrinkled face gaining a youthful determination that lit up her dark eyes. Because I'm too old to keep keeping secrets, Dr. Miguel. Because I don't want to die with this on my conscience. And because your father deserves justice before he leaves this world. And you're not afraid of Eduardo, of what he might do if he finds out. Conceição smiled, a sad but determined smile. The only thing I have in this life is my dignity, Doctor. I have no children, no house of my own, no savings. When you have so little to lose, it's easier to be brave. Before Miguel left, she grabbed his arm with surprising force. There's one more thing you need to know. Mr. Eduardo has a hidden safe in his office in the city, behind the big picture of the farm. The combination is his birth date backwards. It has documents that no one else has seen, things that he doesn't even trust his crooked lawyer to keep. How do you know that? Walls have ears, Dr. Miguel, and housekeepers have eyes. When you're invisible like me, you see everything without being seen. The following morning, Miguel met Helena and Augusto at the dollhouse for a discreet breakfast. On the rustic table, he laid out the contents of Conceição's box. This changes everything, said the patriarch, examining the documents with slightly trembling hands. It's not just about domestic violence now. It's about fraud, forgery, possible corporate crimes, and perhaps something worse, added Helena, holding the letter from her deceased ex-girlfriend. If that girl didn't kill herself. Miguel took a sip of the organic coffee he had brought from Holland, one of the few luxuries he had allowed himself to bring in his luggage. We need more. We need the contents of that safe, and we need witnesses willing to talk. The final hearing is in 2 weeks. Until then, we have to build such a solid case that not even Eduardo's powerful friends will be able to save him. Augusto looked at his youngest son with a newfound respect. The idealistic boy who had left 7 years earlier had returned as a man of purpose and vision. And how will we do this without Eduardo suspecting? Miguel smiled, not his brother's calculating smile, but one that combined determination with compassion. We're going to use against him the same thing he's always used against others, the certainty of his own superiority. Eduardo is so convinced of his victory that he's not looking to the sides or behind him. The courthouse in the small town of Vila do Café, a neoclassical building constructed in the 1950s with money from the large local producers, had never been so crowded. A line had been forming since the early hours of the morning, winding through the central square under the yellow ipe trees that offered partial shade from the relentless sun. The trial of Eduardo Mendonça for domestic violence attracted not only curious locals, but journalists from all over the country, transforming the quiet town into a hive of activity. Television vans, reporters with microphones, photographers with telephoto lenses, all vying for the best angle to capture the family drama that had become a national phenomenon. Inside the courtroom, the inadequate air conditioning struggled against the human heat. The dark wooden benches were completely occupied, with people squeezed shoulder to shoulder. At the back of the room, journalists and law students stood, notebooks and tape recorders at the ready. Augusto, wearing his only suit preserved from his son's looting, a classic navy blue cut that seemed too big for his now slimmer frame, sat in the front row. Beside him, Miguel and Dona Concepcion formed a protective barrier. The housekeeper, wearing her best outfit, a discreet dark blue dress she saved for Sunday Mass, seemed simultaneously nervous and determined. At the prosecution table, prosecutor Dr. Luciana Campos, a black woman in her 40s, known for her uncompromising stance in domestic violence cases, methodically organized her notes. On the opposite side, Eduardo's defense team consisted of 3 lawyers in impeccable suits and confident expressions, the kind of legal team that only considerable fortunes could afford. When the court officer announced the judge's entrance, Dr. Paulo Mendez, a respected magistrate from the neighboring district, specially summoned for this case due to the local judge's conflicts of interest. Everyone automatically stood up in respect. Helena, now visibly 6 months pregnant, entered escorted by female police officers. Her simple, light blue maternity dress contrasted sharply with the paleness of her face. Her brown hair was pulled back in a low bun, and she avoided looking directly at anyone in the room. "Let the session begin," announced the judge after the formal procedures. First testimony, Ms. Helena Mendonça. Helena walked slowly to the witness stand, one hand unconsciously protectively resting on her stomach. After the formal oath, the prosecutor approached. "Mrs. Helena Mendonça, do you confirm that your husband, Eduardo Mendonça, physically assaulted you on multiple occasions?" In the silence that followed, one could hear the hum of cameras, the discreet sound of pens scratching paper, the collective suspended breathing of all those present. Helena raised her eyes, meeting first Augusto's gaze, then Miguel's, and finally fixing on the prosecutor. Her voice, once a timid whisper in the preparatory meetings, now echoed firmly through the courtroom. "I confirm. During 3 years of marriage, I was assaulted more than 30 times. I have permanent scars on my back. I broke my arm twice, and I lost a baby last year due to a kick to the stomach." A murmur of horror swept through the audience. Someone at the back of the room sobbed audibly. "Could you describe the pattern of these attacks?" "It started with criticism of my appearance, my education, my family. Then came insults, destruction of personal belongings. When that wasn't enough for him to feel powerful, there were the pushes, slaps, punches." Helena took a deep breath before continuing. "The worst aggressions happened when he drank, or when some business went wrong. It was as if I were the punching bag for all his frustrations." For nearly an hour, Helena detailed specific incidents, dates, and circumstances. Her voice remained steady, even as she described situations that made jurors look away, unable to bear the images her words evoked. Eduardo's lawyer, Dr. Ricardo Mendez, stood up for cross-examination. Tall, elegant, with graying hair at the temples that gave him an aura of wisdom, he adjusted his expensive framed glasses before speaking. "And why didn't you report it before? Why only now, when coincidentally my client is about to close the biggest coffee export deal in the country's history?" Helena looked directly at Augusto before answering. "Because before I had no one who believed in me. Before, I had no one willing to sacrifice everything for the truth. Don't you think it's convenient that this accusation arose precisely when your father-in-law and my client were having disagreements about the direction of the business?" The prosecutor stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. The lawyer is trying to portray the victim as part of a conspiracy." "I accept the objection. Please rephrase it, Doctor." Mendez smiled, that practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Helena, you are currently pregnant, is that correct?" "Yes, 6 months. And is this the couple's first child?" "Yes, I lost another one, as I said." "Are you absolutely certain that my client is the father of the child he is expecting?" An indignant murmur swept through the room. The prosecutor stood up again. "Objection. This is clearly an attempt to defame the victim." "Your Honor," Mendez replied calmly, "we are merely establishing possible reasons for this sudden accusation." "If paternity is in question?" "No, he isn't," Helena interrupted, her voice finally breaking with emotion. "There's no doubt about the paternity. Eduardo is the father. The only man I've had a relationship with in the last 3 years." The judge banged the gavel. "The objection is accepted. Dr. Mendez, please limit yourself to issues relevant to the case. Paternity is not on trial here." Following Helena's testimony, other statements came forward, from doctors who treated her injuries, household staff who witnessed verbal abuse, and even the manicurist who noticed recurring bruises. When Augusto was called to testify, the court fell completely silent. The patriarch walked slowly to the witness stand, leaning on his carved cane. Each step seemed calculated, measured, as if he carried not only the weight of his 78 years, but the entire history and responsibility of generations. "Mr. Augusto Mendonça, are you aware that you are testifying against your own son?" asked the prosecutor, her voice instinctively softening before the respectable figure of the elderly man. The old patriarch placed his wrinkled hand on an old leather-bound Bible brought from home, not the usual courtroom Bible, but a family heirloom passed down through generations. From his other hand, to everyone's surprise, he pulled a small bag of coarse cloth from his pocket. "If the court permits, I would like to take an additional oath. An oath that my father taught me, and that his father before him practiced." Seeing the judge's curious nod, Augusto opened the small bag and poured a handful of coffee beans onto the table next to the Bible. Dark, perfectly selected beans, exuding a rich aroma that quickly permeated the courtroom air. In the tradition of the old coffee growers of this region, we make the coffee promise. We swear on the first beans of the harvest that our words are as pure as our product. A coffee grower who breaks this oath is considered dead among his peers. Not just legally or socially, but spiritually, it is the most sacred promise we know. With his right hand on the Bible and his left on the coffee beans, the patriarch looked directly at his son, seated at the defense table with an impassive expression. "I swear before God and these grains that every word I speak is true, even if it destroys my own flesh and blood, even if it costs the legacy of generations, even if my name is forgotten. Truth is the only harvest that truly matters at the end of our lives." His testimony, clear and direct, avoiding both drama and self-pity, made a deep impression on the jury. Augusto accurately described what he had witnessed on the night of the party, but also detailed the patterns of behavior he had observed over the years, the escalation of his violent temper, the excuses he himself had given his son, the paternal neglect which he now recognized as complicit. "My son wasn't born a monster," he concluded, his voice breaking for the first time. "He became what he is because of my failings as much as his own choices. Therefore, the responsibility to denounce him rests doubly on me." During cross-examination, the defense attempted to portray Augusto as a confused man, possibly suffering from senile dementia, manipulated by his youngest son who allegedly desired control of the business. "Mr. Mendonça, are you currently taking any medication?" asked Dr. Mendez with feigned concern. "Yes, medication for blood pressure, cholesterol, and an occasional anti-inflammatory for my knees. My memory, however, is intact, as you can verify with my doctors. Are you aware that your son Miguel has just returned to Brazil? Don't you think that's too much of a coincidence? My son came back because I needed him, and he, unlike Eduardo, always put family above money." The crucial moment of the trial, however, came after the lunch break, when the prosecutor called a surprise witness, Conceição Oliveira. The housekeeper, visibly nervous but determined, recounted not only what she had observed in the relationship between Eduardo and Helena, but also revealed documents she had kept for years, including evidence of forgeries, fraud, and possibly more serious crimes. "I have more to say," she concluded, after nearly 2 hours of testimony, "but I would need immunity to continue." The judge, realizing the seriousness of the new accusations, summoned the lawyers for a private meeting. When they returned, the prosecutor announced, "Your Honor, in light of the new evidence, we request the expansion of the investigations and the inclusion of new charges against the defendant, including forgery of documents, corporate fraud, and potentially obstruction of justice." Eduardo's lawyer protested vehemently, but the judge, after deliberation, accepted the request. This trial will be temporarily suspended so that the new evidence can be properly processed. The defendant will remain in custody during this period. As the officers approached to escort him back to his cell, Eduardo finally lost his composure. "This is a conspiracy," he shouted, rising abruptly. "My own father, my own blood, You're going to destroy everything we've built over generations because of a hysterical woman and a senile old man. As he was being led from the courtroom, Eduardo cast one last glance at his father, not of anger or contempt, but something more disturbing, complete incomprehension, as if he genuinely didn't understand why his actions were wrong, why he was being punished for something that, in his distorted mind, was simply his natural right as a powerful man. In court, the case had set a precedent. Helena's courage in testifying, coupled with Augusto's unprecedented attitude, had created a legal precedent that now helped other women break cycles of violence. Volunteer lawyers offered free legal assistance, inspired by the case they informally called the Mendonça precedent. As the sun set over the coffee plantations, tinging the newly planted seedlings after the flood with gold, Augusto Mendonça contemplated his true legacy. Not a fortune, not an empire, but values that would survive for generations. A different kind of wealth, more permanent and meaningful than bank accounts or property titles. "You know, Eduardo," said the patriarch, as they drank coffee together for the first time in over a year, watching the dark liquid reflect the orange sunset sky, "there's an old wisdom among coffee growers. The best coffee grows in lands that have known storms." Eduardo looked at his own hands, now calloused from honest work in the fields. Hands that finally resembled those of his father and grandfather, marked not only by time, but by a direct connection to the land. "And what about the worst men, Dad? Can they also be reborn?" The old man smiled, his tired but serene eyes gazing at the horizon where new coffee flowers were beginning to sprout, small white stars against the deep green of the renewed vegetation. "Coffee teaches us our greatest lesson, son. Even the most bitter fruit, when subjected to fire and transformation, can offer the world something sweet and invigorating. The question is, are we willing to endure the heat necessary for this transformation?" That night, for the first time since the beginning of the family turmoil, the old Mendonça family dining table brought together 3 generations. The patriarch who had chosen justice above blood ties, the son who was beginning the painful path to redemption, and a tiny baby who, in her innocent sleep, carried the promise of a completely new cycle. Helena, sitting next to her father-in-law, still couldn't look Eduardo directly in the eye. Forgiveness, as they had learned, wasn't an event, but a process. Long, imperfect, sometimes painful. Trust, once broken, needed time and consistency to be rebuilt. But that night, as the house fell silent and the stars rose above the coffee plantations, a new understanding dawned on the Mendonça family. Some cycles can and should be broken so that others, better ones, can begin.